This day has come, and we are going to the place that everyone has dreamed of visiting. Of course, we are talking about Sparta, the most severe state in history. Today, we're going to grow our abs and go under the command of King Leonidas to fight the Persians and then find out what the feat of 300 Spartans was really like. Unfortunately, real life very different from what the movie is in games, but that's what our channel is for. So vote if you would like to go to Sparta in the comments and get ready to be very brutal. Let's start with a historical note. Name of the state. Sparta is not very correct and has taken root thanks to the Romans. Take a look at any shield of a Spartan warrior. You can clearly see the letter L in Greek sounds like lambda. The reason is simple. The Spartans didn't call themselves Spartans. They were called Lacedaemonians in honor of the city of Lacedaemon, the accent of which is mistakenly transferred to the last syllable, and later the city was often called Sparta, were the modern name. He was high in the mountains, and Thetis was the most severe flogging. He boy had to withstand a lot of whipping, which stopped only after the first blood. And if the Spartan broke out in a scream, the blows continued, and after the blood only increased in intensity. Such is the final exam of a Spartan warrior. Our vassal is a real warrior and passed the exam perfectly. But the exam only gave rights to leave the closed barracks and appear in public. At the age of 17, Vasia just started military service in the state, so he could understand all its difficulties. Let's talk about the salary. As we have already mentioned, even good food was considered a luxury in Sparta. Even good food was considered a luxury, so the phrase Spartan diet is not an empty sound. Vasily received a standard set of food for a month: 3.5 buckets of barley, 2.5 kilograms of cheese, a kilogram of dates, and about a half liter of wine. And vassal, like other Spartan warriors, was given a few metal bars weighing 625 grams each, but that's another story. To avoid luxury and inequality, the Spartan ruler Lycurgus came up with an interesting solution for the accumulation of silver and gold. The death penalty was introduced, and the money in Sparta was these same iron bars, one weighing 625 grams, and to buy something, and if the transaction was public, you could be interested in it and find out where the person had so much money. Arriving in Sparta, a resident of another country was faced with the fact that he simply could not buy anything. The Spartans looked at gold and silver coins with horror. Such a scheme did not kill corruption, robbery attacks, and robberies. What's the point of taking a bribe if you need to build a whole barn to store money, attracting attention? So that Vasia, in addition to a meager diet, received a few rods on them could to buy 10 kilograms of meat and get by to survive while training in a killer daily regimen, because a Spartan warrior is worth a dozen others, and this principle had to be maintained. In general, the warrior's equipment is not bad. 300 Spartans were given to the movie. Our vassal, like any heavily armed hoplite, wore a round shield, a helmet, a shell on his chest, and a knife. For some reason, the movie decided to leave the torso of the Spartans open. But of course, this is stupid in reality. It is dangerous. But there were light Spartan infantrymen with spears, bows, and darts. These guys fought with everything because they were trained to use any weapon from the age of 7. The structure of the Spartan army was unique, and some details to this day successfully steal the army of the modern day. A clear linear formation in a line, strict discipline, and incredible physical strength made the Spartan army invincible. Line up 8 rows deep, phalanx could stretch for 1 kilometer, and by 371 BC it was believed that it was physically impossible to defeat such an entity. Physically impossible. The reason is simple. Unlike other armies, the Spartans did not have engineering structures. They simply pushed forward relying on brute force, and in it, they surpassed and killed any enemy. Returning to Vasia, we recall that it is 480 BC, and the war with the unwashed Persians is in full swing. Sparta is ruled by King Leonidas, who, like everyone else around him, is a great warrior. Everyone knows from the movie 300, and will not repeat the obvious things but only focus on the differences between the movie and reality. Let's say that among the 300 will be our Vasia together with King Leonid, who fought on the front line with the soldiers. Vasily keeps the defense against the Persian army in the gorge of Thermopylae. According to various estimates, there were up to 250,000 Persians, and they were opposed by only 7,000 Greek soldiers. It is worth noting that the number of Spartans is not accidentally 300 people are the personal guard of the king and the most selected soldiers, and they held for 2 long days the enemy, who outnumbered them 20 times. They would have held them longer if not for a local. Ephialtes, a resident, decided to make some extra money. Ephialtes told the Persians about a mountainous path which could be used to bypass the positions the Greeks But Spartan intelligence wasn't, and Leonidas was the first to know about it, and the king immediately sent the whole army home, leaving only 300 hoplite guards with him. But this is not romance but common sense. In Sparta there was no worse sin than to retreat from the battlefield without a clear order, and since Leonidas was king, there was no one to wait for orders from anyone. And in order not to become an outcast whose name was covered in shame, Leonidas was left alone, and our vassal also chose a similar fate. The movie forgot only one detail. Along with the Spartans, other Greeks, including 700 residents of Thespia and 400 boys from Sviva. And next to the Spartans were the Ilots, about which we talked about earlier. The number of slaves is not specified, but the fact that in the campaigns they were used to make a kind of light infantry is officially confirmed, so that against the bypassed Xerxes, there were not 300, but about 1,500 people. But even this does not negate the fact of the crazy feat, because these crumbs put about 5,000 Persians. And not just any Persians, but also including the immortals, the guard of the Persian army. In total, 4,000 Greeks were killed in 3 days. 1,000 Greeks. About the loss of the Persians more than 5 times higher than this number, largely due to the psychological factor. In the future, the Greeks will win the war and conclude a very favorable peace. Do not grieve for our Vasily. How could you know his life? He did not have an easy life, and to die in battle for a Spartan meant the highest honor. For example, one of the 300 Spartans, Aristodemus, at the time of the battle was sick. Leonidas sent him to the village to be treated, and after the king and the guard were killed, Aristodemus returned to Sparta, where he was nicknamed Aristodemus Coward, and even further exploits of the guy did not affect his position in society. A year later, in 479 BC, another Spartan, Pausanias, led the Greek army into the final battle with the Persians, which took place near the town of Plataea and was marked by the total defeat of the Persians. Even though they were 3 times more, Aristodemus, a member of the original detachment of 300 Spartans, became a hero of the battles. But even this did not change the attitude towards him. In conclusion, we note one more funny fact. If the Spartan boys were trained for war since childhood, then the girls were much simpler when they had children. The girls were taught to write, play sports, and carefully monitored their health. In a sense, Sparta can be considered the progenitor of feminism, because even with weapons the Spartans coped with a bang. For a second it was a couple of thousand years ago.